Okay. Okay, right. This is a teacher talk through of the February Upper Six literature mock on the Tempest extract question. Right. The first thing I do is I look at contextually where this comes in the play. This comes in Act 4, Scene 1. And so I might be talking about the beginnings of self-realization, the beginnings of self-knowledge, maybe not completely because it's Act 4, but maybe the idea that comedies tend to lose, characters lose identity and then they regain identity towards the end. So I'll be looking at that a little bit. Sometimes it's good to contextualize the scene a little bit. Not many people did this, but this isn't the beginning of Act 4, Scene 1. What happens before it is the mask scene. And Shakespeare, or rather Prospero, is using power, or the power of magic, to create the mask scene, a celebration of unity, the celebration of marriage of Ferdinand and Miranda, but also a warning to them. And that's light, celebratory, and it's in contrast to what this scene is about and the use of magic in this scene. Okay. I will be talking also about the fact that this is a subplot. Any kind of scene involving a subplot, you'll be expected to talk about what the role of a subplot is. It's supposed to provide physical comedy, but it's also a reflection on the main plot as well. So in many ways, you'll be awarded for marks in which you kind of compare this scene with other parts of the play, perhaps in its use of magic, but also in the subplot character's desire for power and how that compares with other characters in the play. So you were awarded for that if you not only looked at the extract in itself, but talked about the significance of the extract in relation to other parts of the play. Okay. Right. Okay. How I might probably do this is take apart certain sections and deal with it closely rather than dealing with the whole extract. So I'd probably deal with the language of Prospero and Ariel. And Prospero's asking, where are these varlets? Where are these criminals? Again, his imperative commanding tone signifies his power over Ariel. Okay. And Ariel gives quite a long description of these men being drunken. And again, I think that Shakespeare's audience would, you know, the groundlings would probably be drunk and kind of enjoy seeing themselves reflected on stage. The characters come in drunk, they're completely wet. They're smelling of wee and shit probably because they've been put through the mud. So drunkenness, smelling of wee and being totally soaked is going to be funny in a physical slapstick kind of way. So you're awarded for thinking about how this would look on stage. Remember, you're talking to an audience, not a reader or the book. They were red hot with drinking, sir, so full of valor they smote the air. You might be reminded of who else smoted the air, but the nobles in the previous act when the harpy came to punish them. Not many people talked about this, but there's parallels between what Ariel's doing to the subplot characters is what Ariel, in position of the harpy, did to the noblemen. They're being punished for their sins. And there's a kind of parallel repetition of that in this scene. So if you talked about that, that would be good. And smoke in the air shows their futility. Okay, so drunkenness and subplots is something that you might talk about. Then Ariel talks about how their use of magic kind of led them by the nose, the role of music being an aspect of magic that you talk about. He beat his tabor, his drum, and they followed. Now, you've got to get terminology in this. They followed, you know, like at which like unbacked colts. So again, the simile of them being like stupid animals. They pricked their ears, advanced their eyelids, lifted up their nose as if they smelt music, synesthesia. So again, the idea of music in the play is a kind of symbol of magic and the power of magic. So you might talk about how they're seen as animals, easily manipulated, and how magic is used to manipulate different characters in the play. Okay, but not only that, the power of magic is used here to punish. Again, we might think of how Prospero punishes through pain, through cramps and pinches of Caliban. And here these men are put through a similar pain. And again, it's the same kind of punishment that the nobleman had in the previous act. Calf-like, again, the use of them being like animals. And my lowing, again, that's what a cow does, it lows, sort of followed through. And they were took through briars, right? We're all city folks, but these are forms of bushes, furzes, pricking goss and thorns. So Caliban has taken them through parts of the landscape that's going to tear their skin apart, okay? And not only that, he's left them in the filthy pool before your cell, in the foul lake, overstunk their feet. So again, it sets up the comedy of their entrance, right? We're going to see their entrance, so we know and anticipate what they're going to look like and smell like and how they're going to act. So we're going to find that funny. Well done, my bird. My. I can't tell you how often people have used my as a possessive pronoun. It's not, it's a possessive adjective, right? Well done if you've remembered that. Try and use precision in your writing. Well done, my bird. He's still that sense of Prospero owning him. You might have talked also about the use of latch verse here, that sense of their intimacy. Retain your shape still and bring the trumpery in my house. Again, the word trump is about useless kind of materials, trumpery. Go hither for stale to catch these thieves. What catches these thieves? But clothing, symbolic of power. And well done to you if you talked about that. Okay, he's going to catch them with tempting them with power in the same way that in Act 2, Prospero tempts Antonio and Sebastian with trying to take power. Okay, so in many ways, Prospero plays God, allowing people to show their true selves or their sins so that they will be then punished and then hopefully come to some kind of repentance. Prospero's alone on stage here. Let's consider where we've got that. And again, we've got an aside or perhaps a soliloquy. He calls on this devil, a born devil. Talking about Caliban, of course, on whose nature nurture can never stick. Nature is one of the most common words in Shakespeare. Things that are unnatural. Macbeth, for instance, an unnatural act. To go against nature, to go against the natural order of being is often referred to, and that's something that Caliban's lost. Well done to you if you identified patterns in the text, right? There's imagery of corruption, of disease here. Prospero talks about the body grows uglier. I will plague him. His mind cankers or is diseased. You might talk about how he sees Caliban in a diseased way, but maybe his desire for revenge is a disease in itself, a little bit like Ferdinand in The Duchess of Malfi. It's done in the same way. Disease itself is quite corrosive. Keep on it. Well done. Right. 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 Ready? The illusion of power is shown through the symbols of clothes there. Right. And let me get back by myself. I will plague them all to roaring. Now, I would talk about that line. I will plague them all to roaring. Prospero hasn't gained self-knowledge just yet. He's still in revenge. He still has to learn virtue rather than vengeance is the way. And that comes in Act 5, and it comes from Ariel. Prospero has to learn, in some ways, you could argue, from Ariel and also from Caliban. But here he hasn't. So you can quote from stage directions. Ariel comes in with the laundry, glistening apparel, clothing symbolizing of power. Okay, good. Let's move on. Hang them on the line. Right. Prospero and Ariel remain invisible. Again, does God remain invisible to our sins? Is Prospero godlike looking at our sins? Are we being asked to see him in this godlike way, thinking about our own sins? They all come in all wet. How many of you touched on the stage direction of it being comic? Right. Pray you. I mean, you could talk about how there's connotations of religion throughout the play, but that's typical Elizabethan language. Pray you, listen, you know, Tread softly, the blind mole may not hear. Who's the blind mole? Arthur. Prospero, yes. Again, Caliban is called a monster. He uses the same language with Prospero. You taught me language and I learned how to curse. Okay, a mole can hear everything because it can't see anything, can it? Monster, so they use the same language as Prospero. Parallels of the subplot characters treating Caliban in the same way? Yes, you should be able to see that. You say he's a harmless fairy, this Ariel, but he's done little better than played the jack with us. That's kind of an idiom of the time. He's taken the mickey out of us would be the modern equivalent. The audience would find that funny, their own language replayed on them. And then Trinculo tries to use a much more haughty, sophisticated kind of language. I do smell all of horse piss, at which my nose is in great indignation. So again, the playfulness of language is supposed to get a joke. It's kind of comic in some ways. Do you hear me, monster? Monster, do you hear me? If I should take displeasure against you, look you. So again, it's a threat. Stefano sees himself as a king. What do kings do? Immediately, they start threatening the lives of their subjects. You could talk about the corrosive nature of power. Yes, says Trinculo, you were a lost monster. You would be a dead monster. Good, my lord. Give me thy favours still. Be patient for the prize I do bring to thee. You might remember the word prize. Who was it used for before? Miranda, of course. Remember the prize. Everyone sees Miranda from a feminist point of view. You don't have to talk about interpretations in this answer. Some of you talk too much about interpretations. It's not necessary. That's for the next question. Just talk about language, form, and structure. So let's talk a little bit about comedy, right? Because I don't think people talked about it enough. Comedy is like loss of identity and then identity restored. Comic moments are slapstick and like these men smelling and wet. Talk about that. Comic moments are also perhaps comedy is that loss of identity. Stefano thinks he's a king. And so he starts acting like he considers himself to be a king. So he threatens everyone around him. So there's loss of identity, but it has a point. And the point is perhaps people who want to gain power are willing to kill others for it. Or people who think they have power start to use it in a terrible way. And Shakespeare's audience would be sensitive to how leaders lead. Okay, but here it's kind of done for comic reasons. But there's a kind of serious point behind the play that lust for power is a corrosive thing. So there's the dramatic irony of Ariel and Prospero looking at them here. Okay, so Prospero is in charge. Don't forget the prize I bring thee. Okay, now, well done to you if you talked about Caliban's use of pronouns, looking down perhaps to them, see, in some ways revealing himself as a leader. Trinculo and Stefano speak mainly in prose. Caliban drops into verse now and again as well, again showing some kind of difference between them, even though Caliban also slips into kind of very subservient language, as we'll see in a moment. So Caliban's talking about them being quiet. Don't make a noise. The mole will hear you. Please be quiet. This is all done in a whisper, okay? But then Trinculo says out loud, aye, but to lose our bottles in the pool, their alcohol, their drink, the exclamation mark shows he's shouting. So the audience would find that funny. The appeal to be silent and he shouts. Well done to you if you talked about the control that alcohol has on other people in the subplot. Mirrors what magic does to people in the main plot. Okay, you notice how many parallels and opposites I'm talking about. Then I'm talking about form and structure. Stefano says there's only disgrace and dishonor in losing our drink. That's quite funny because disgrace and dishonor seems big words for quite trivial actions of just losing their drink. And maybe we're supposed to think about the true disgrace and dishonor is in what people do for power. An infinite loss, hyperbole, to talk about their drink as an infinite loss or a disgrace, a dishonor. Abstract nouns, hyperbole applied to drink is quite comic, particularly to a Shakespearean audience who might be at this moment drinking. People went to the South Bank to let their hair down, if you like. Look at bears. It's an area of prostitution. Go and see a sordid play and just generally be drunk as well. So in seeing yourself on stage is actually quite an amusing thing for some people, I suppose. Okay, but the loss of drink is a punishment as well. Again, they're being punished for their sins, you might have said. So remember the prize. Keep on what we have to do. If you didn't talk about Antonio and Sebastian attempting to kill the king and this being paralleled here, you've kind of not really touched on what subplots do. Right, okay. Right. Again, there's more to this. Trinculo is yet there. That's more to me than my wet, and yet this is your harmless. They're starting to think that this fairy is not such a harmless thing. The growing sense of self-awareness. Perhaps I will fetch off my bottle, that I be over ears for my labour. Again, so just references to their desire for their bottle. Be quiet, my king. Seest thou here is the mouth of the cell. Again, using pronouns to sort of imperatives. He's being subservient, but also imperative as well. No noise. Do your good mischief, which may make this island thine own forever. And I thy Caliban, I thy footlicker. Now, is he subservient or is he just using language to get what he wants? Is he manipulative? Okay, you can try and be tentative, try and use possibly, maybe, perhaps in your language, and show how we could see Caliban perhaps in different ways. You don't have to bring in performances at this point either. Okay, do thy good mischief. Can you spot linguistic and literary techniques as they're going along? Oxymoron, of course. Okay, so we've got that sense of manipulation, perhaps, but also how he sees himself in the form of a slave. Give me thy hand, I do begin to have bloody thoughts, says Stefano. Again, he's thinking about killing. O King Stefano, O peer, O worthy Stefano, look what a wardrobe is here for thee. Okay, now you could see Trinculo saying this in a kind of mocking way to Stefano because he doesn't see him as a king. The exclamation marks say that. Always consider punctuation of exclamation marks. Or you could see it as like they've come across the clothing and they're tempted by the power. So it could be mockery, or it could be just the wonder of the garments. They're going to achieve their aim. But Caliban sees through it, thou fool. 'Tis but trash. The Americanism perhaps was once an English word that went across the ocean. Caliban sees these powerful garments for what they really are. They're just trash. The lust for power, perhaps it's starting to dawn on him. This doesn't matter. Oh, monster, we know what belongs to a frippery. Oh, King Stefano, they're overwhelmed with the idea of power. But Stefano says, put off that gown, Trinculo. A lot of you didn't talk about the end of the extract. It's always significant. Always deal with the end of the extract. Put off that gown, Trinculo. By this hand, I'll have that gown. Stefano is threatening him by this hand with death. If you don't give me that gown, I'll kill you. By this hand. So again, it's the dangers of lust for power. Remind us of Antonio Sebastian trying to kill Gonzalo and Alonso. Thy grace shall have it, says Trinculo. Does Trinculo use all these titles? Thy grace, O kitten, O peer, O worthy Stefano. Is he using them in a mocking way, or is he subservient to him? You know, you could see it in two ways. But again, Caliban sees them as just fools. Why do you dote on luggage? Trash, you fools. Leave it alone. Do the murder first. The line ends on Caliban still looking for revenge. Just as the beginning of the scene, Prospero is still looking for revenge. Always try and consider the beginning and ends of scenes. Right. Try not to talk about Shakespeare audiences all acting in the same way. They are no different to us today. They probably have different views of this. Just highlight perhaps little differences. You don't need to do performances in this answer. Okay, that brings us to the end of this extract. I hope you found it useful. I'm going to close this down now. Ah, I did it again. Right now, stop recording.